In a chic fashion boutique, a woman walked in dressed simply and without ostentation. The staff hardly glanced her way. The manager brushed her off, refused to show her the exclusive designs, and even insisted she leave the store. But what no one knew was she wasn't just a customer. She was the CEO, and the cost of their arrogance was about to be exacted in full. Before we dive into this story, let us know where you're watching from. We love to hear your thoughts. The late morning sun glinted off the polished windows of storefronts along Madison Avenue, casting intricate patterns of light onto the pavement, where shoppers strolled in designer loafers and tailored jackets. Town cars purred softly in the distance, and the aroma of freshly baked croissants from a nearby pâtisserie mingled with the crisp scent of autumn. Standing prominently among the elegant row of shops was Luxe Couture. Its facade was sleek and minimalist, letting its prestige, not signage, speak for itself. Behind the tall glass doors, the interior radiated refined elegance, polished hardwood floors gleaming under modern chandeliers, velvet-lined display cases perfectly aligned, and a soft jazz melody drifting overhead like a subtle promise of sophistication. Margaret Ellison paused for a moment at the entrance, one hand resting on the sleek chrome door handle. She glanced up at the familiar name etched into the glass, her name in a sense, and exhaled softly before pulling the door open. The quiet chime overhead barely registered as she stepped inside. She moved with steady purpose, but not the kind of stride that demanded attention. Her outfit was neat and understated. A charcoal blazer with a single-button front, navy trousers that ended just above her ankles, and a pair of well-worn leather loafers showing faint creases from years of use. Her hair was swept into a tidy chignon with hints of gray at the temples, and a delicate silver bracelet, more sentimental than costly, adorned her left wrist. Over her shoulder hung a black leather tote with slightly frayed handles, a small tag from a rental car dangling unobtrusively from one strap. She didn't linger to admire the store's grandeur. She knew it intimately. She had selected the hardwood herself, approved the lighting for each display case, and spent late nights with designers debating how each garment should be showcased to capture the perfect interplay of light and fabric. What she did notice, however, was a minor, almost imperceptible flaw. The front right display case, holding a rotating collection of silk scarves, was misaligned by half an inch. Not enough for most customers to notice, but enough for someone like her. Someone who had spent 23 years building a brand where every detail mattered. Still, she said nothing. This morning wasn't about inspections or tweaks. She carried no clipboard, no assistant with a tablet, no branded name tag. This was one of her unannounced visits, done perhaps 3 times a month, where she entered one of her stores as a customer, not to catch anyone failing, but to ensure no customer, especially one who didn't fit the typical profile, was ever made to feel unwelcome. Her eyes scanned the store, observing, not judging. A young man in a tailored navy suit arranged cashmere sweaters behind a side counter. A petite woman in her early 20s stood near the front register, sorting printed receipts. Only a few customers were present this early, an older man examining leather belts near the back, and a stylish woman in stilettos sipping sparkling water while browsing handbags. Margaret made her way to the center of the store, where the Aurora collection was displayed in a custom-built oval case of frosted glass and polished steel. It was the store's most exclusive offering, a series of handcrafted evening gowns and accessories, most priced well into 5 figures. The centerpiece, a flowing silk gown with intricate crystal embroidery, was Margaret's favorite. She had overseen its design, choosing the fabric herself during a trip to Milan. As she reached the display, a shadow crossed the glass. "Good morning," came a voice, smooth and calculated. "Welcome to Luxe Couture. Can I assist you with something today?" Margaret turned slowly to face the woman, now standing across from her. She recognized the name before the face: Claire Montgomery. Claire, the newly appointed manager of this flagship location, wore a pristine cream blouse tucked into a tailored gray skirt ending just below the knee. Her nude heels, polished and sharp, matched the clipped tone of her voice. Her auburn hair was pulled into a sleek, low bun, and a delicate silver necklace rested precisely against her collarbone. Her hazel eyes held a practiced smile, but no warmth, just routine courtesy. Margaret returned a small, thoughtful smile. "I'd like to see the Aurora gown," she said simply, her gaze steady. That's when the air seemed to shift, almost imperceptibly. Claire's smile didn't fade, but something in her eyes flickered as she took in Margaret's loafers, the modest tote, the lack of flashy accessories beyond the simple bracelet. The pause that followed was brief, but Margaret noticed. She always noticed. Claire didn't respond immediately. Her manicured fingers painted a soft taupe, tightened slightly around the tablet she held. She tilted her head faintly, as if weighing something, then stepped subtly to the side, positioning herself between Margaret and the display case. "The Aurora pieces," she said lightly, but with a cautious edge. "Start at $15,000 and go up from there, depending on customizations." Margaret nodded once. "I'm aware." Another pause. Claire's eyes scanned Margaret again, not just her outfit, but her posture, her bag, her voice. Though she said nothing overt, her narrowed gaze sent a clear message. She didn't believe Margaret belonged here, not near a five-figure gown. "Well," Claire said, her smile now strained, "most of our clients interested in the Aurora collection book a private consultation in advance. It allows us to prepare the pieces in a more exclusive setting." "I prefer to browse in person," Margaret replied evenly. Claire hesitated, and Margaret could almost hear the mental calculations about appearances, time, risk. Then, like a switch, Claire pivoted. "We do have several new arrivals that might be more approachable," she said, gesturing toward a case near the front. "Very elegant, excellent craftsmanship. Our signature line offers pieces with more flexible pricing." Margaret didn't budge. "I came to see the Aurora gown," she repeated, her tone steady, no longer open to negotiation. For a moment, their eyes locked. Claire's smile froze, now brittle. She blinked, then gestured vaguely toward the back. "May I ask," she said, her voice lowering as if seeking discretion, "if it's for a special occasion?" Margaret tilted her head. "Why do you ask?" Claire let out a small, breathy laugh. "It's just that the Aurora collection is a significant investment. Most clients come in for galas, weddings, major events." "And if I'm here because I appreciate fine fashion?" Margaret asked, her voice carrying weight now, measured and precise. Claire shifted uncomfortably. "Of course," she said quickly. "It's just, we want to ensure we're guiding guests to what suits them best." Margaret said nothing, letting the silence stretch until it grew heavy. From across the store, a soft chime sounded as new customers entered. Two women in their 50s, dressed in cashmere coats, chatting softly. They were immediately greeted by a younger sales associate with a warm smile and an offer of sparkling water. Claire noticed them, her posture straightening slightly. She glanced their way, then back at Margaret with a flicker of distraction, as if eager to move on. "Excuse me one moment," Claire said, and without waiting for a response, she glided across the floor with practiced elegance. Margaret watched her go, her eyes cool and steady. She turned back to the Aurora display, taking in the details, each gown cradled in soft lighting, the crystals catching the light just so. Everything was as she'd envisioned during the design phase, except for the person standing before it. From a few feet away, she overheard Claire speaking to the new customers, her tone now warm and animated. "Ladies, you've arrived at the perfect time," she enthused. "We just received 2 new pieces for the Spring Gala collection, ideal for a charity ball or evening event. She offered them sparkling water and gestured to plush chairs. "Please, have a seat. Let me show you what just arrived from our London atelier." The customers smiled, at ease, settling into the chairs. Claire guided them toward a tray of accessories, her demeanor seamless, like second nature. Margaret, still by the Aurora case, remained invisible. She folded her hands lightly in front of her, every movement deliberate. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw a younger associate, with short blonde hair and a name tag reading Sophie, glance her way. Sophie looked hesitant, her gaze flickering between Margaret and Claire, who was now placing a velvet tray of bracelets before the new customers. Sophie approached slowly, her tone gentle. "Hi there. Can I help you with anything today?" But before Margaret could respond, Claire's voice cut through, sharper than before. "Sophie, could you check the inventory in the back, please? We're missing the updated invoice for the gala pieces." Sophie paused. "Oh, I just thought." Claire didn't look up. "Now please." Sophie glanced at Margaret, her expression apologetic, then nodded and headed toward the back hallway. Margaret's eyes followed her briefly, then returned to the display. She waited. Claire continued chatting with the new customers, laughing at their anecdotes, complimenting a scarf, and leaning in to describe the stitching on a clutch as if it were a masterpiece. The Aurora case remained unattended. Minutes passed. 5, then 10. Margaret stood unmoving, her breath slow and deliberate. The jazz overhead had shifted to a soft piano piece. Conversations hummed across the room, but she felt none of it. She had been overlooked before, passed over in boardrooms, questioned when others were trusted, but never in her own domain, the place she'd built with her vision and grit. Her phone buzzed faintly in her tote. She ignored it, choosing to observe, not react. Not yet. Claire finally glanced her way again, noticing Margaret still standing, still waiting, still present. But she turned back to her preferred clients, her smile widening as she presented a pearl necklace, saying, "This reminds me of the piece we designed for the Whitmore Gala last spring. Do you recall that story?" Margaret's jaw tightened. She inhaled slowly, exhaling through her nose. Her fingers curled slightly, not in anger, but in restraint. Not yet. The laughter across the room grew louder. The two women sipped their sparkling water as Claire, all smiles and gestures, draped a scarf across a mannequin. She leaned in, whispering something that made them chuckle like old friends. Margaret remained by the Aurora case, her legs aching faintly from standing so long, but she didn't move. Not yet. Not until she saw whether anyone in this store would extend her the same courtesy given to those sipping Perrier just feet away. She glanced toward the hallway where Sophie had vanished. The young woman hadn't returned, and Margaret suspected she wouldn't without Claire's approval. Her gaze swept the store, the plush seating, the fresh lilies on each table, the trays of macarons, the sleek mirrors, all designed to evoke comfort, elegance, and prestige. Every inch had once been her vision, and now she stood in its heart, treated like an outsider. Finally, Margaret stepped forward, walking slowly toward the seating area. She didn't hurry or raise her voice. Her loafers made no sound on the hardwood, but when she cleared her throat politely, Claire's face stiffened. "I'm still waiting to see the Aurora gown," Margaret said, her tone calm but unyielding. Claire looked up, startled that Margaret was still there. She straightened, her smile thin. "Yes, of course. Well, as I mentioned, those pieces require an appointment. It's not really a browsing section." Margaret folded her arms. "And yet, I've been standing here for nearly 15 minutes. No one else needed an appointment to be shown anything today." Claire's eyes darted to the women beside her, then back to Margaret. Her smile wavered. "That's different. They're long-standing clients. Mrs. Preston and Mrs. Langley have shopped with us extensively." Margaret nodded slowly, letting the silence stretch. So, your definition of service hinges on purchase history. Claire shook her head. It's not personal. It's policy. For items at this level, we verify serious intent. Proof of funds, bank letters, something to confirm we're not wasting resources. And what makes you think I'm here to waste your time? Margaret asked, her voice still even. Claire hesitated, fingers brushing the edge of the velvet tray as if for support. Look, she said, her politeness fraying. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable browsing our signature line. We have lovely pieces under $2,000, available without the formality. Margaret's eyes sharpened. I didn't ask for formality, she said. I asked for the Aurora gown. Claire laughed, a short, almost involuntary sound. Ma'am, those items are extremely high value. I'm not trying to be rude, but people don't just walk in off the street and expect to try on a 5-figure gown. Margaret's response was devoid of emotion. I'd like to purchase it. Claire blinked. Excuse me? I said I'd like to purchase the gown, Margaret repeated, slow and clear. Claire stared, then gave a small, incredulous chuckle. I'm sorry, but for transactions of that size, I need proof of funds, credit documentation, account verification, something to confirm you're able to complete the purchase. Margaret met her gaze. Is that standard for every customer? Claire didn't answer immediately. Because I've watched you offer sparkling water, display trays, and entertain others without questioning their finances, Margaret continued. So, I'll ask again. Is it policy or is it something else? Claire squared her shoulders. For high-value purchases, yes, it's standard for everyone. Margaret raised an eyebrow. Then I'd like to speak to the store manager. You're speaking to the manager, Claire said stiffly. Then I'd like to speak to someone above you. There is no one above me at this location, Claire replied. This is my store. A brief silence followed. Margaret's eyes narrowed. She stepped closer, not aggressive but firm. Your store? Claire's expression hardened. Yes, I'm responsible for this store. I decide who's served and how. Margaret studied her for a long moment, her voice lowered, carrying weight. And you've decided I don't deserve to be served. Claire crossed her arms. I've decided you're causing a disruption, and frankly, you don't look like someone shopping for that kind of fashion. You've been loitering, ignoring direction, and making my staff uncomfortable. Margaret inhaled, her heartbeat quickening. She wasn't trembling. She'd moved past that years ago. Her anger was now calm, clear, a refusal to accept another slight in a lifetime of them. I'm not going anywhere, she said simply. Claire's mouth parted slightly. Excuse me? You heard me, Margaret said. I'm not leaving. Claire's voice rose. Then I'm calling security. Heads turned across the store. One of the women lowered her glass. The young man restocking paused. Claire reached for the store's tablet. You're making a scene. I don't care who you think you are. You need to leave my store now, or I'll have you removed. Margaret slowly opened her tote and reached inside, unhurried, unshaken, with the quiet authority of someone in full control. She pulled out her phone, holding it lightly. Go ahead, she said, her voice steady, resolute. Call them. Claire's fingers hovered over the tablet. But before you do, Margaret continued, I'm going to make a call of my own. The room seemed to pause, not dramatically, but subtly, as if the store's pulse had faltered. Customers, staff, even the soft jazz faded as Claire's eyes locked on the woman before her. Still unknown, still unrecognized, but no longer dismissible. For the first time, the balance of control began to shift. The tension was palpable, present in the stillness of the staff, the sideways glances of customers pretending to browse, and the weight of the moment. Margaret stood tall, her phone glowing faintly as she prepared to dial. Claire's lips pressed tightly, her fingers gripping the tablet, but a flicker of doubt crossed her eyes. Margaret dialed with deliberate calm. The call connected after one ring. She spoke with crisp authority. "Yes, this is Margaret Ellison. I need an emergency board meeting now. Madison Avenue location. Get everyone on the line." Claire blinked, her mouth opening silently. The name hadn't clicked yet. She clung to her image of Margaret, a troublesome walk-in, not worth her time. But the name rippled through the room. Sophie, who had returned to the counter and was scrolling frantically on her phone, her eyes widening. She nudged Daniel, the assistant manager, who had been quietly working at the back computer. She showed him her screen. He stared, his face draining of color. "Oh my God," Sophie whispered. Claire noticed the shift, seeing her staff frozen. Sophie's clutching her phone. Daniel was rigid. She turned back. "What did you say your name was?" Claire asked, her voice sharp. Margaret lowered her phone. "Margaret Ellison," she said with calm precision, replied, "Founder, Chief Executive Officer, and owner of Luxe et Couture." Couture? Claire blinked as if dazed. She glanced at the tablet, then back at Margaret, who had ended her call and returned the tablet to her tote with fluid ease. "No, you can't be," Claire stammered, her composure fracturing. "Can't be what?" Margaret asked. "Can't be wealthy? Can't be in charge? Can't own the store you just tried to throw me out of?" Claire opened her mouth, then closed it. Her posture wilted, her hands trembled. She looked around the store now, not as a manager, but as someone who'd miscalculated gravely, with consequences looming large. Margaret stepped closer, her authority unmistakable. "You didn't ask who I was. You didn't ask why I was here. You took one look at me, my clothes, my bag, my shoes, and decided I didn't belong. And not only did you make that judgment, you acted on it. You tried to shame me in my own store." "I didn't know," Claire murmured, eyes her darting, voice faltering. "I swear I didn't know." "You didn't care to know," Margaret replied, her tone unyielding. By now, several customers were recording. The two women who'd laughed with Claire earlier stood aside, their faces now blank with unease. One of them set her glass down untouched. Thomas, the security guard, stepped forward but kept his distance, his eyes shifting between Margaret and Eleanor Claire. "Please, I wasn't trying to offend you," Claire pleaded, her voice desperate. Look, this store has a reputation. I have to protect its integrity." "Integrity of what?" Margaret interrupted. "Your assumptions? Your reputation? Because if this is your idea of integrity, we've got a far bigger problem." Daniel stepped forward. "Miss Ellison," he began. Margaret turned to him, and he stood straighter. "You tried to stop this," she said. "I saw you. You sensed something was wrong." He nodded quietly. Margaret looked at Margaret next. "You were the only one who approached me like a person. That didn't go unnoticed." Sophie nodded, her eyes teary. Then Margaret faced Claire again, whose polished image had collapsed entirely. Her hair, still neat, now seemed out of place, her posture slumped, her breath uneven. "I have a family," Claire whispered. "I was just doing my job." Margaret's voice was steady, resolute. "And I built this company over 23 years building this company, so to ensure no customer would ever feel the way I did in my 20s. No one should feel small for entering a store because of their appearance, especially not in a store that carries my name." Claire clutched the counter. "Please, I'll take the training again. Whatever's needed. Just please, don't fire me." Margaret studied her for a long moment. There was no gloating, no malice, only quiet resolve and deep disappointment. "You had your chance to do better," she said. "You chose not to take it." Silence followed. Claire's breath hitched, but she didn't speak. Behind her, The register screen displayed the homepage. Margaret had approved just weeks ago. A looping video of luxe couture stores nationwide, with the slogan, "Style with Soul" at the bottom. "Daniel," Margaret said, addressing him while facing Claire. "Effective immediately. You're the manager of this location. Contact HR. They've been alerted. Submit security footage." Daniel nodded and stepped away. "Sophie," Margaret continued, "you're now assistant manager. We'll review your new duties tomorrow." Sophie's mouth opened, but she only nodded, wiping her eyes with her sleeve. "Thomas," Margaret said to the security guard, "you showed judgment when faced with a questionable order. You'll receive a commendation and a pay raise effective today." Thomas nodded firmly, his expression unreadable but steady. Finally, Margaret faced Claire once more. "You can collect your belongings now," she said. "You're no longer employed here." The silence was absolute. No music, no whispers, just a faint click as a display case closed nearby. Claire didn't argue or cry. Not yet. She turned and walked to the back, her steps silent, slow. The silence following Claire's exit hung like fog after a storm. Dense, still, not yet dissipated, but no longer threatening. For a long moment, no one stirred. Margaret stood in the center of the store she'd built, her hands folded, her pulse calm. She didn't feel victorious. What she felt was equilibrium, something that had tipped off balance when she'd entered and been ignored, dismissed without a glance. She let her gaze sweep the space. The jazz resumed, soft strings filling the quiet. Daniel was on the phone with HR, speaking in low, measured tones. Sophie stood behind the counter, steadying her breath, her cheeks flushed with relief and disbelief. Thomas returned to his post by the door, nodding once when he met Margaret's eye, a silent exchange of respect between two professionals who valued restraint. Margaret stepped away from the seating area and returned to the Aurora case. The lighting danced across the gown, catching each crystal in a gentle rhythm. But her eye caught something else caught her eye again. Not the gown, but the alignment. The case was still off by half an inch. She bent down, her fingers grazing the glass, and with a careful nudge, she aligned it perfectly. It was a small act, silent, but it shifted. The room seemed to breathe again. Straightening up, she addressed the room. "I apologize for the disruption," she said, her voice warm but firm. "What happened today isn't who we are. This company was founded to serve everyone who enters with dignity, care, and respect. That will never change." A woman, an older guest who'd lingered quietly by the back, stepped forward. "Ma'am," she said softly, "you handled that with more grace than most would have. You didn't shout, didn't lose control, just stood your ground." Margaret smiled, a genuine knowing smile. "I've learned strength doesn't need to be loud," she said. "It just needs to be steadfast." She turned back to the case, took one last look at the gown, and nodded, content. The store was aligned again. The standard was restored. And Margaret, the woman who'd been told she didn't belong, had reminded everyone she'd never left. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.